Hi there. This is my response to Shubz's 40-minute video about my little Destiny clip from a couple of weeks ago now. Been a bit busy, sorry. But what I have today is actually more than a response. It's damning, the kind of evidence that in any sane world would be the final nail in Destiny's coffin. Why respond? Because being docile isn't actually virtue, and resistance and bringing truth to lies isn't actually wrong. There's nothing noble about being an agreeable consumer and just believing and regurgitating everything you're fed. Walking node in the matrix. You can't complain about being treated like cattle if you're okay being led like cattle. And if making an example of you, Shubz, helps to break the stupor, then so be it. Let's get into it.
To everybody hounding me, asking me if I've seen this video that was put out by Sam Costello.
Well, not much to say about your rebuttal, Shubz. Very weak. You suggest I'm on P.
Bloody idiot. Jesus. Get off the pipes, sis.
And then turn around and confirm exactly what I said, that your hikoi was funded by Hobson's Pledge. Your defence was, well, Hobson's Pledge gave the money to my producer, not me. Any lobbyist money feeding into something branded independent buys influence, full stop. You said it yourself in your video. Karina has a relationship with Don Brash. She asked him for Hobson's Pledge funding and he gave it. And it was used by you both. So, come on now. Remember, Don Brash was literally the treasurer of a mongrel mob initiative, became trustee in 2021, named treasurer. The only gang that also got funding from Jacinda.
But I haven't received no dollars for what I do on Radio Aotearoa. I've received, a car with some petrol and some kai, which is beautiful, grateful.
Shubz, you again said you haven't been paid yet. Apart from being given a car and petrol and food and funding for the hikoi and whatever else you haven't told us about. In the real world, that's called being paid. Or at the very least, being a kept man. You also said that you have a deal with Ngātai. Something to do with how well the ratings turn out, but you never said what that deal was.
Yeah, we had a deal. There was a deal there. Let's, build this thing that we've got. Wait till the ratings come back. But at this
You then went on to explain that the jab couldn't have been given at Destiny Carpark because it wasn't available back then.
Who obviously allowed the space to be used for it as testing station, because as Brian said, they were all freaking out. This is prior to the vaccine actually coming out. So I think what Sam's done here is very smart, but it's actually a little bit naughty. It's a little bit disingenuous.
Not true. The jab was available from February 2021. Tamaki's car park operation ran from mid-2020 through to at least mid-2022, still listed as a formal COVID testing centre as late as September 8th, 2023. And as I've showed before, and will show again today, 2 of Ngātai's nurses confirmed on the phone that booster shots were given in the car park, in the mobile units. You can see the Destiny signage in the background there. You said you reckon I faked the call I included on my video. Got a mate to play along. Fine, call the number on the screen yourself and ask what I asked. They'll tell you.
We have a mobile, yeah.
I called again just a few days ago. Twice. Same number, same distinctive voice answered. Here's how that call went. Oh, hi. Just wondering, were you guys ever doing COVID vaccinations, like the boosters in the Destiny car park back in about 2021, 22?
They used to do it when there was corona, but now I don't think we're doing anymore.
But they were, right? They were doing it
Yeah, when there was corona only.
But were they giving the actual booster shots in the mobile units in the Destiny car park?
Yeah, they have when there was corona. They did the corona testing, did the vaccination.
So they did the vaccination as well as the testing?
Yeah.
Okay, and do you have a woman called Rena Tate working there?
Rena? Yeah, she's practice lead.
On the second call, I got head office.
Kia ora, Whanau Ora Community Clinic speaking.
Hey, I'm just wondering, can I ask about whether you guys were ever giving the COVID boosters in the Destiny car park? Do you know?
Yeah, they did have mobile units. They even had a bus.
Yeah, I saw the bus, but that was to transport the people, right? Not to actually vaccinate them. Yeah, I don't know.
We had vaccination vans.
And this article confirms Destiny was still central to the jabbing operation in late November 2021. So that whole "it was not available" was a lie, Shubz. Probably at the direction of 𝗵𝗂𝘃𝗶𝗹. I mean, you did open by saying, "I spoke to Brian this morning, after all."
I can confirm that I've had a conversation with Brian this morning, and it was addressing this entire video, so I'll speak on that as we go.
4 years ago. You then repeated, "Brian told me," Brian said, throughout your entire video. Sorry, but he ain't called Lion Brian for no reason. You also said they didn't know that the jab was dangerous because the data wasn't out yet. Pull the other one, Shubz. MedSafe was reporting mass harm by late 2020. International data was already pouring in well before that. We knew, and so did they. And your boss 𝗟𝗲𝘀𝗃𝗏, he's not slowing down on this, by the way. He's expanding his poisoning venture into Australia.
Worked on the board for a medical centre for the extra cash, but
I don't know the context exactly of what 𝗟𝗲𝘀, who is, I believe, the pastor of the Destiny Church Christchurch. I don't know exactly what he's talking about, what medical centre.
To clarify, Shubz, that's a clip from my original COVID money trail video from a few years ago now. A Destiny pastor talking about his directorship of the Christchurch Whanau Ora pop-up COVID clinic, where his wife was still practice manager, at least when this video was filmed in 2022.
Well, kia ora everybody, I'm 𝗗𝗲𝘃𝗶𝗹. We've got COVID testing, COVID vaccination. Rather than me talk about it, let's actually catch up with some of our staff.
Kia ora, my name's Rena Tate. I'm the practice manager for Whanau Ora Community Clinics here in ōtautahi.
Destiny leaders all cashed in during the COVID scam, made millions, while also taking control of the freedom movement, setting the parameters on the parliament occupation, on the conversation, framing it as anti-mandate only, when it should always have been anti the toxic jab and democide.
He was the only one that wasn't getting government funding, so they couldn't control him. Whereas these other, leaders of different organisations, religious ones, were getting funded by the government, so they couldn't. They were told to shush.
Destiny doesn't get government funding? They've received millions over the decades, most of it brought in by your boss, 𝗵𝗵𝘀𝗀𝗃, as chief executive of Destiny's social services arm. He fervently lobbied for it, complained when it wasn't enough, and even accused MSD of racial and religious discrimination in order to get more. You need to do your own research on 𝗵𝗂𝘃𝗶𝗹. Don't let him tell you what to say, or he'll make a fool of you.
Brian being a government asset, I don't see it, because the government does everything they can to deter Brian or to stop Brian from doing anything.
The government does everything they can to deter him? They platform his insightful messaging on state media every other day. Tell me, Shubz, where else does this kind of crap fly with no real pushback? Here's what he was putting out just the other day.
We kill you, we bind you up, and we stomp you under our feet right now.
And we declare war. We're coming after you. Let torment and misery come upon you now. Repent or get the hell out of my nation. We declare war. Every high thing that's been raised up in this nation.
We come against everyone that's ever spoken about anyone from Destiny Church right now.
We come against anyone who's ever commented about us, anyone who's ever spoken against Pasana or Apostle Brian Tamaki, that you have to be on the watch, because the devil, that he is coming for you. The hell is waiting for you. Anyone that's ever spoken against the church, right now we unleash the angelic destruction angel right now to come after you. They're going to wipe you out. They're going to kill you right now. We unleash an angelic bomb to destroy you right now. We bind on every false journalist, every person, every writer, every reporter. We say right now that your hands shall not begin to type. We rip out your tongue right now. We rip out your tongue and we burn it to the ground. And we say, like the fire, burn, it shall burn and burn. And we say...
That's one radicalised little army. One step from putting words into action. Anyone else would have been arrested for his incitements long ago. Out on the streets, covered in fake blood, the taiaha and doing the at immigrants, burning their flags. Even the Buddhist one? Look, contrary to the opinion of some, I don't wake up each morning thinking, who can I take down today? How can I divide the freedom movement? But when truth gets called lies and lies get called truth and kids end up in the crossfire, it's not okay. I mean, look at these young guys. Auckland's Destiny congregation is small enough that some of Kiwi's over 200 admitted sexual assaults could easily have touched them. Destiny's kids are not safe, and you can see it in how these boys have turned out. What does it mean for their future wives, their future kids? Because victims often become abusers, and repressed anger always looks for somewhere to land. That's why I speak, not against these young guys, but for them. Brian's calling it persecution that his gun licence been revoked. None of this lot should even be allowed to own a butter knife with how they carry on. And police should have seized your devices too, Brian, not just your guns. Though they'd probably have enjoyed them, because they were into that stuff too. You went on, Shubz, to say that he's the only one who's been prosecuted for COVID crimes. Eh? Plenty of others have. Enough with this most persecuted man in New Zealand rubbish. The truly persecuted don't get a stage-managed, red carpet, theatrical grand entrance to prison escorted by a wall of mainstream press. And they don't get held in isolation where no one can confirm their presence. They get thrown in with the rest of the goyim. You praise him for feeding the poor in his congregation with his hunting skills, but skip that if he didn't demand around 15% of their income, maybe they could afford to feed themselves.
Destiny aren't the only Christian church that preaches tithing, and it's voluntary. And again, the 15%, I don't know what all that is, up to 15%, like you're putting a bit of sugar on top there, Gil.
I remind you, I was a member for years. I also spent 20 odd years in other churches, and none of them grab for money like Tamaki does. And giving it Destiny is no more voluntary than that mandated jab. What he does is extortion, plain and simple. 10% gross, so that's about 12.5% right there. Hefty weekly offerings on top, a yearly big harvest offering that they're expected to save for all year, and the steep costs are demanded from Man Up. Many do give up to 30% of their income, barely able to feed their kids, told that God will be displeased with them otherwise. So no, there was no sugar on top there, Shubz. I was actually understated.
Still coming. Tens of thousands of dollars in crisp, high-denomination banknotes are laid out at his feet.
It's going to be placed in the open so it can swirl the aroma and the fragrance can spread through the place and the atmosphere.
Quite honestly, if you're fine with this kind of wealth gap, Tamaki jet-setting around the world first class, dressed in Armani and fleets of cars and bikes and boats and homes and rings worth more than his congregation will see in a lifetime, while their kids go hungry, then you got a problem, and you're not the voice of the everyday Kiwi.
It seems like you were a bit hurt there, love. Like something happened. What happened to you, Samantha?
Well, that one's straight from Tamaki's mouth. Well-used destiny propaganda. The only thing that happened to me was that I was intimidated out of the church for confronting Tamaki over Eddie Long. Or rather, I chose to leave when I could see that I was no longer going to be welcome if I wasn't silent, if I didn't close my mouth. And I woke up to who Tamaki was. And to the fact that destiny could actually be a pedo ring masquerading as a church. But do, continue.
So this is Eddie Long. So Eddie Long, when I was a kid, my mother and that we were all in the church. Eddie Long was sort of known as like a spiritual father. And when I talked to Brian about it this morning, he said...
So you were raised in the pedo cult, Shubz. And Eddie Long, the pedophile, was your spiritual father. You have said publicly that you were molested as a child. Interesting. Continue.
Brian's not, like, doesn't live in his pocket. Pedophiles also people who exist under the radar a lot of the time. They'll get swept under the rug. He says, well, I don't know anything about that. I knew him over a 6-year period, but that doesn't mean I know what he's up to in his house and all of that kind of stuff. Like, how many people live lives and then find out that someone was a pedo and they never even knew?
Eh? He only knew him for a 6-year period. But in his own autobiography, he describes meeting Long in 2002, and he then appeared in Brian's church in 2003. Who could forget that one?
I predict in the next 5 years, by the time we hit our 10th anniversary, and I don't say this lightly, that we will be ruling the nation.
He made a declaration that in 5 years, you shall be ruling and reigning in this nation. That means you control the wealth. That means you control the riches. That means you control the politics. That means you control the social order. That means that you are in charge.
Yes, I, Brian the Great, shall be ruling the entire nation in 5 years, and you shall all be bowing at my feet. Like, how was he not carried off by men in white coats after that? Seriously. And here's Brian in Eddie's Atlanta church right before he died in 2017. The difference between 2002 and 2017 is 15 years. I'm pretty sure of that. So he was lying to you again, Shubz. The record proves it. And Tamaki knew all along about Eddie's well-documented child sex abuse cases in 2010. Even I knew, which is why I confronted him that same year. Yet he invited Long back as soon as he could get out of the US in 2016. Again, not informing Destiny parents of his history, and letting him wander freely amongst his youth for another whole week. The Herald called them both out for it. Tamaki and Long's answer? An arrogant no comment. Why are you trying to pretend that this didn't happen, Shubz?
It turns out that Bishop Eddie Long, tutued with quite a few young teenagers that were nearly men, they were nearly men anyway. Whatever happened, he had to pay out all this money, whatever.
Turned out he tutued with a few teenagers who were nearly men. Whatever. Excuse me? Multiple sworn witness testimony stated that he began interfering with them as boys, barely teenagers, some younger. How dare you try to diminish that by calling them nearly men? Oh, that was very deliberate. They were children, Shubz. He was their married pastor. That is predatory behaviour. Criminal child sex abuse. Their lives were ruined. Videos they've made, their witness statements, and the book that they co-wrote together since have all made that undeniably clear. Call yourself an anti-pedophilia advocate? Like I said, Shills like you are optics only. Skin deep.
Stupid. And in whatever it's been, 45 years of his ministry, there's only ever been that one dude, I don't even know his name, but yeah, that you're talking about that actually got done and went to jail.
Now, talking about 𝗗𝗲𝘀𝗵 Ora, you say he was the only case of child sex abuse in Brian's entire 45 years of ministry. Let's keep it real here. Destiny's only existed for 28 years, and child sex abuse there is fully systemic. There are multiple cases. Do your damn research, Shubz, because clearly you haven't got a clue what you're talking about. Either that or you're lying. Brian's run cover for paedophiles in his leadership since Destiny began. I have emails between 𝗗𝗲𝘀𝗵 and a children's church leader asking for offenders to please be removed from children's ministry, and Hannah outright refusing, saying they won't be going anywhere. Brian brought Eddie Long back, gave him full access to his youth well after the litany of his crimes were exposed. 2 adult Destiny pastors' kids in New Plymouth were exposed for years of sexual assault on foster kids inside the pastor's own home. Brian responded by ignoring those victims and bringing one of the accused to Auckland and promoting them to leadership. Right after Campbell Live proved that the whole congregation knew and were told to stay quiet. And they did, because that's the level of control that this cult has over its members, and why I called my documentary Pulpit of Deceit and the Silent Pews. And then there's the Rotorua Destiny Children's Church leader, sentenced to 8 years in prison, a friend of the Tamakis, who they also then denied knowing. I have the emails proving otherwise between 𝗗𝗲𝘀𝗵 and the mother of that child, who then, strangely enough, was handed her dream job, running a Destiny-affiliated foster organisation, put into the same position that the Destiny pastor was forced to step down from over that scandal. That whole thing is another story in itself. Here's a part of her message to me. My child was sexually abused by a kids' church leader in Rotorua over a few years, and he was convicted and jailed. Hannah denied any involvement with Destiny, and 3 times now I've seen Hannah and Brian take no responsibility. And Hannah's statement saying, I'm not guilty as I'm not associated, but she's very closely associated. And 𝗗𝗲𝘀𝗵 Ora, of course, convicted of at least 200 assaults on boys in the church. And there are more. I know, because ex-Destiny members have reached out to me directly. Here's one of those messages that I was sent, with an email exchange between a parent and 𝗗𝗲𝘀𝗵 attached. Here's just a few segments, firstly from the mother, from what was a long and detailed message to 𝗗𝗲𝘀𝗵. I'm feeling unsafe. I was told by a leader that no one gets abused in Destiny. I was really upset by this and said, well, actually my daughter was, and I know of others. The elder then told me I need healing and that I'm operating out of hurt. I was operating out of trying to keep our children safe. There's a group on Facebook. Some of our parents in church are a part of it, and there's no responsibility for the mistakes they've made. One of the guys murdered a 3-year-old child, and Man Up are supporting him to get his other 4 children back. I was seen at an event with my uniform, and one of the Man Up men saw me, and I was followed in my car. I don't feel safe. I guess I need to remove myself, which is so hard as I love the house and you and Bishop and the vision. I don't feel confident talking to the elders, as I was made to feel like this was my own personal issue. And here's 𝗗𝗲𝘀𝗵𝗀's response. Pretty much summed up with, do whatever you need to do, love, and signed off with, have a fabulous day. Public comments and posts have been left here and there too, like this one written to Brian. His affair that lasted over 5 years. 10 years I called you my spiritual father. It sickens me to my core that I let you shatter my world and take everything I ever knew from me with one swift move. How did you not know I was being molested and abused by someone that you call your spiritual son, my stepdad? Other kids being beaten Monday to Friday and forced to attend on Sunday. I can count a few. And what about the victims of 𝗗𝗲𝘀? Or do the kids of violence escape through the cracks because it's bad advertising for the church? I'm shaking because I've held this for so long. Or this one. I tried twice to address this. Leader who abused kids was a kids' church leader. Lived with a leader. No support for the victims. No police checks for those working with children. I know of 3 separate situations. Again. So don't you dare give me that this is the first time bullshit, Shubz. That's a flat out lie.
You got to also realise that there are tens of thousands of people who are in and around Destiny Church throughout the country.
This is where you parrot Brian's lie that he didn't know 𝗗𝗲𝘀. Tens of thousands in Destiny, you say? How could he possibly remember his close friend? There were only 1,338 members in 2023, 𝗗𝗲𝘀's time, and it's dropped significantly since. So, who's putting the sugar on top now, Shubz? Give it a rest, mate. Their families were close, long-time friends. I've showed footage of 𝗗𝗲𝘀 in Brian's home on multiple occasions. This footage from before his name suppression was lifted.
Hey.
Here he is ministering alongside 𝗪𝗂𝘃, his mother, heading up Legacy, and his brother was the star of the stage for well over a decade, living with Brian's sidekick Jenny Marshall as a teenager, until he vanished from Destiny the moment 𝗗𝗲𝘀 was exposed.
There was that dude that wasn't a pastor. It was put out that he was a pastor, but he wasn't a pastor. And many people inside of Destiny Church confirmed that to me directly, including Brian.
I never said he was a pastor, only that he held the top position in Youth Nation, Destiny's youth church, because he did. General of Youth Nation, for years. That little particular smokescreen came about when 𝗪𝗂𝘃 originally claimed that he was never a leader. In the media, he said that. And then I published proof to the contrary, so 𝗪𝗂𝘃 shifted his rhetoric to he was never a pastor. The same little subterfuge that you're now recycling on his behalf. And Shubz, don't try to pretend that you couldn't find out all of this information on your own, because it's been public for years. 𝗪𝗂𝘃 made a formal statement and promised to sue me for $300,000 just to silence me. He never followed through, of course, because doing so would have exposed his lies, which I knew all along. You act like you've never heard any of this before. Are you sure, Shubz, that you're a pedo opponent? Because right now, you're looking more like a pedo protector.
And you support Israel, the world's biggest paedophile sanctuary.
Israel being the biggest paedophile sanctuary, I don't even know. Here's the dude. Youth leader, whatever, I don't know. This guy, he's true.
Once again, every time your stance on Israel comes up, it's a sort of, oh yeah, or whatever, yeah, nah, bro, I don't know about that, and then a quick pivot to something else like you just did there. If you genuinely don't know this information about Israel, that you've just proven my point about your ignorance in that little Destiny clip I made. And yes, like I said, they do like their shills ignorant. The less they know, the less likely they are to say anything revealing or ask any real questions. Case in point, you also said in your video that you have no idea if Pauline Hanson is MAGA or a Zionist, when it's as glaring as her hair dye. You said you get to speak to people like her because you'll talk to anyone, not because you're a shill. Not a shill, you say, just suspiciously good at bumping into your New Zealand First mates while on your afternoon stroll. Camera rolling. Incredible.
A bit of a walk here, and what's going on here? New Zealand First. Is that NZ First MP David Wilson? Big Dave on the sledge. Bernadette. Just going for a walk in NZ, fellas. Interesting. Things you see on your walk, eh? There he is. Not just into economics, this fella.
What a coincidence. And if you really will talk to anyone, why did this
Also, Samantha, if you want to come on and have a yarn, you're welcome to. Reach out.
suddenly become, actually sis, never mind. Exactly as I predicted it would, the moment you realised I'd show up armed with facts, and you'd be reduced to a puddle on the floor by a woman live on air. And you know, I'm not done. We need to talk about the false claims that you made about Zionism and anti-Semitism in your video.
I don't know if you realise what from the river to the sea, that means deleting all the Jews that live in between there. That's what from the river to the sea means. It means you're deleting every Jew in existence between there. Now that also includes Jew children, Jew old ladies and old men and everything.
Tamaki teach you that, did he, Shubz? Because that's some prime grade Zionist propaganda right there. From the river to the sea is actually a call for peace, equality, and freedom from the Israeli invaders' brutal military rule. Not for death to the Jews. And it's not anti-Semitic either, because Israelis aren't actually Semites, but Palestinians are. And I personally can't think of anything more anti-Semitic than genociding Semites. Can you? Then you claimed it's wrong of me to criticise Alfred Ngaro's support for Israel because, you know, it makes sense that he does, because he's got Jewish blood. Like an ideology has blood. Alfred's grandmother, Rita Goldstein, was the daughter of a Polish Ashkenazi Jew. Exactly the same as Netanyahu/Milikowski. No lineage to anyone born remotely near Israel. Every single Israeli Prime Minister since 1948, after Rothschild and the British Crown stole Palestine with the 1917 Balfour Declaration, has been Eastern European. Zero connection to the 12 tribes. So, what's this Israel has a right to their land nonsense from Ngaro? The Knesset's land is in Eastern Europe. Their pale skin and light eyes is a bit of a clue, mate. It's like me converting to Buddhism, then showing up in Cambodia and claiming that their land's mine now because I've become a Buddhist. So either scram or I'll shoot the lot of you. And if you resist, well, you're a terrorist. Zionists like Ngaro cloak their movement in Judaism because it's a religion that comes with a promised land attached in the world's most geopolitically important region. Zionism is a vehicle for world domination, a supremacy ideology, not a religion, and certainly not a Middle Eastern ethnicity. And I see you got Yitzhak Goddard, Israel New Zealand Network spokeswoman, on your page there, saying Samantha Costello needs to be arrested. For what? Telling the truth? Knowing some basic history? For naming the real terrorists? If that ever does become a chargeable offence, yeah, I'll probably be one of the first in a cell. But I'll keep speaking even then, regardless. Even if it's just to my cellmates, or my pet cockroach in solitary. I've named him already. Brian. Already played this out in my head. Look, Shubz, you protest that you're not a Zionist. Okay, well, you don't actually seem to know if you are or not. Probably because you don't know what one is or what their agenda is. Probably couldn't even find Israel on a map. But I never said you were a Zionist. I said you're a Zionist useful idiot. So hopefully that clears that up. You don't need to knowingly serve them. Ignorance and mindless support does the job just fine. One thing always gives away a useful idiot, though, the shill. Hypocrisy. You lot just can't avoid it. You know, like standing against paedophilia and iwi corruption while backing Tamaki and working for 𝗟𝗲𝘃𝗶𝗹 himself, George Ngatai. You can't blame me for noticing this stuff It's pretty hard not to. Your alignment with Israel Firsters makes you complicit in the atrocities going on over there. You mock people who get off their couch and go onto the streets to protest the mass slaughter of children. Like that's the crime. It's not okay to mock those speaking up for humanity, and it's not okay to support that genocidal state or its mouthpieces. End of.
If I had it again, I wouldn't do it, you know?
Yeah, but that's what's happened, and now they've framed it up as if you've bashed your wife up.
Yeah, that's about, and I mean, I did, when I left, they said, well, we're going to the police if you don't return it, and I said, well, get lost. I was a little bit harsh than that.
A little bit further into your video, you started raving about how amazing Man Up is, how they've stopped men beating their wives. That was your words. Then you brought on Man Up facilitator Shane Dempster, who's just been sentenced for beating up his wife, saying, oh, you said I wouldn't talk about him, Sam, but here he is. Looked like a bit of a rushed setup to negate my claim, admitting that you filmed it the same day that you watched my video. You implied that Shane's weak assurance that, nothing much really happened, just a bit of a scuffle, I love my wife, made it all okay. Saying they framed it like you bashed your wife up, cuz? No, Shubz, a jury found him guilty of beating his wife and threatening to kill her. Like the pedophilia at Destiny, it comes from the top. Here's some messages sent to me by Man Up South Island leader Derek Tate after I exposed the Destiny COVID clinics, talking about punching a woman in the mouth and kicking and slapping and giving an example of a real man and a real man's hug. If this is how they speak to women in public, can you imagine how they speak to them in private? How they treat them? I've heard plenty of stories. Not many of them good. So praise Man Up all you like, Shubz, but John Campbell's Under His Command series exposed the truth on that one. And Shane Dempster is living proof. Yet you paraded him as Exhibit 8. What?
Under His Command Season 2.
Okay, now to your live stream, July 30th. Well, that was an adventure. I tuned in, said hi in the comments. You didn't seem to love that, did you, Martel? And the entire show was like credibility suicide in slow motion. It was painful to watch. You opened talking about me, called me a cooker, said I'm on drugs. I corrected your misquotes of my words and then addressed your repeated invitation to come on your show. And then you started filibustering. Oh, it's not up to me, it's up to my producer. So I messaged Karina. And then you began to unravel. Why should I have you on? Saying you had personal stuff on me, but you wouldn't use it. Why did you need to say that, Shubz? I said, go ahead, bring it right here. Knowing you couldn't, because there's nothing to bring. Sure enough, you didn't. It could have turned the tables, the abuse and assault allegations against you, the family court proceedings in Melbourne, but it didn't. You had a Rotorua councillor on at the time, and so you asked people to comment on what issue in Rotorua they thought hadn't had enough attention. So I answered, the Destiny Children's Church leader sentenced to 8 years for raping a child, a friend of the Tamakis, that they again claimed not to know. And then the church just carries on as if nothing happened. Yeah, I don't reckon that got enough attention. You were happy to read everyone else's comments aloud, but not so much mine. So I asked if that topic was taboo, seeing Brian and Georgie are mates. And then you made it very clear you would like me to disappear, please. I didn't. You then started ranting that the event in Rotorua had never even happened, that you're full of caca, sis, and that the recent media case was the only incident in Destiny ever. I then pointed you to one of my documentaries on the decades of paedophilia at Destiny, And you just said, why should I watch that? You said, anyone can stitch kaka together and make it look real, girl. And that I know nothing about Destiny because I'm Australian. Well, that was news to me. So I told you no. And the mother of that raped child actually called me herself. And how I also had evidence that Destiny were refusing to remove other offenders from children's ministry. How I used to be in the church and, had to leave after the whole Eddie Long thing. And that's when you pretended that there were no comments. Sweating visibly, losing the plot. Even vanished for a few minutes of dead air at one point. Came back with an ACT candidate. But sadly for you, I wasn't done. I reminded you of the previous ACT leader's homosexual child sex convictions and current prison term, and Seymour's texting with teenagers scandal recently. You began yelling that, there were no receipts for any of that, and just laughed it off, blamed the kids, I kid you not, and said the real issue was parents letting their kids drink, but not Seymour. It was just a big joke to you, calling it just one text. I corrected you, said it went on for days, it was a stream. Anyway, after that guest hung up, happy to get the hell out of there, you lost it over the Hikoi funding from Hobson's Pledge, spluttering about how they gave Karina the money, not you. So I thanked you for confirming that they gave you the funding, and that seemed to set you off all over again. You were not having a good day. Next guest, Dougie from the Free Speech Union, another massive Israel firster. Hopefully I'll find time one day to cover the Zionism running through that outfit because it's really something. Doug came out swinging. What the hell is that Samantha on? Just because Hobson's Pledge funded you doesn't mean you were funded by Hobson's Pledge. So I thought, what the hell? Why not give Doug a round while we're here? So I asked him about the anti-free speech union's Atlas funding. And he laughed it off, said it was only one campaign, just a little thing about gang patch laws. Yeah, of course they were behind that one. So I reminded him that Atlas has actually funded 2 other FSU initiatives just recently. And suddenly poor old Doug couldn't see the comments either. He then scarpered, and you spent the next 20 minutes ranting that I am definitely not welcome on your show, while openly whoring yourself out to Atlas, begging them to come fund you. You said you didn't even know who they were, but you wanted their money, please, come fund me. But they wouldn't be able to tell you what to say. Which is not quite how Atlas works, Shubz. Anyway, just when I thought it couldn't get any more blatant or insane, in strides Captain Zio himself, Simon Court. And the rest of the show turned into a parade of debunked Zionist propaganda. Him saying Hamas spent all day on October 7th cooking babies. They beheaded them first and then they roasted them in ovens. And that the IDF has never intentionally harmed one single Palestinian civilian. While you gormlessly clapped along, agreeing with every word. When it finished, I thought, wow, well, you've just completely toasted yourself. Fried, sunny side up. No coming back from that. But then it vanished. Or maybe it's just members only now, paid viewing. I don't know. Oh, that's right. You don't make any money. Sorry, forgot. One last little thing before we go, Shubz. A little litmus test for you. You say you're not a shill, so therefore you'd be all about equal political opportunity, right? Okay, we'll prove it. Interview 𝗗𝗏𝘀 from New Zealand Loyal. The party actually trying to break the machine instead of feed it. My guess, you won't. You did invite him publicly in your comment thread, and I thought, oh, it's a bit more optics. And yeah, sure enough, he responded by saying, okay, send me your contact details, Shubz, more than once, and you've just ignored him ever since. Because you're not about herding the cattle to freedom. You're about herding them to the same old meatworks through the New Zealand First and ACT doors. Anyway, I think that's it for today's episode of Shubz Says Things and I Fact Check Them. Tune in next time for another exciting round of guess what load of tripe I'm debunking today. See you then.